Okay, listening audience, we are going to try and connect some dots. Last time I asked the question, why is it that teaching a black person to read a crime? Or the question actually said, why was teaching a black person to read a crime punishable by death? And has it changed? And if so, how has it changed? Today, we're going to see if we can find some answers to that or get some clues as to why that was and why it is, and what we can actually do about that. From my own personal experience, reading has the ability to free you. Reading also helps strengthen one's ability to communicate. Reading also teaches you or strengthens your ability to think critically and to see the bigger picture, to recognize what is being said, talking about the words being spoken, that to recognize when what is being said is not what is being communicated. Reading gives us some place to go when we have to stay where we are. And that is so true. It brings to mind the words from a song from back in the day. Free your mind and the rest will follow. Think about that. Free your mind and the rest will follow. And as I said, I have realized over the years that reading has the ability to do that. In preparation for today's broadcast, I recognized a central theme as I was doing reading about the history of educating the black person in this country. And the central theme that I came across was, if you would keep a people enslaved, refuse to teach him to read. If you would keep a people enslaved, refuse to teach them to read. And we know, just by some of the things that continues to happen within our education, our public education system today, that practice of not teaching, not educating black people continues. Now, the difference in this case is, and I'm sure some will disagree with me on this, I think there are options this time where before you really didn't have too many options. And so what would happen, especially with the slaves, what would happen is when one slave learned to read, he would teach the next slave, and then they would teach others, and they would teach others. Also, you had situations where the slave owners' wives and children would sneak and teach slaves to read and write. Then you had the freemen who also would sneak in and teach slaves to read. I found it interesting that all of the 15 states, actually all but 3 of the 15 slave states, had laws on the books about not teaching a black person to read. And historically, the Bible, the good book as our people called it, was used to oppress and control. It was effective because people were forbidden to read it. Only the clergy, and even now the preacher, is viewed as the chief interpreter of what it says, even though you do have the right and ability to read it if you want on your own. You still are encouraged to rely on the pastor or the preacher or teacher to interpret what it says. The Bible, actually, I didn't get in trouble much as a child, but the few times I did, I found it interesting that it had to do with reading. One was with the Bible itself. We had this huge Bible on the coffee table. It was white or beige, and it was this big, beautiful Bible, but I never saw anybody read it. But I mean, it was there, and I read it as a child, even elementary school and before. I would read it, and I would come across things that I wanted to know more about. And so I remember one day coming across something that I wanted to go back to, but I wanted to continue to read the passage I was reading. So I took the pencil, and I always read with a pencil. I took the pencil and I wrote in the margin what it was that I wanted to come back to. Oh my goodness. I don't think my mother paddled me or anything like that, but I can remember the scolding. And oh, this book was so holy and all, you didn't touch it, you did. I couldn't understand if you had this huge book with all these words and you couldn't read it, you couldn't touch it. What good did it do? And in a lot of the homes of people that I went into, they had the same situation. They had this big, beautiful Bible. All those words. But children, you can't touch it. What good did it do? And I never actually got a good answer about that from her. But I can remember thinking, I'll be glad when I get big enough to get my own Bible, and I will read it and I will write it. And that's exactly what I did. Actually, I remember my freshman year in college, I was given a Bible by some students that came to the campus from all over the country. They came through, I guess, evangelizing. And I got my personal Bible. Now, I had one from home, from earlier. But there again, it was given to me by my mother, and I couldn't write in that book. I could read it, but I couldn't write in it. So when I got my own personal Bible as a freshman, I read it and I wrote in it. And I wore the back off of it, because in it was some clarification and some realizations of some things that I had heard being preached and taught in Sunday school and in church services that were just not clear to me, and that I didn't understand because it just didn't make sense. It didn't jive, if you will. There was something wasn't connecting right, and I wanted to know why. I wanted to know what it was and why. And so I literally, that Bible, actually, it exists in a Ziploc bag before I left home, and it perhaps is probably still there somewhere. But I had read it so many times. The back cover had come off. Some of the pages were loose, and I carried it around in a Ziploc bag because I had just wore it out. But reading it and asking questions, especially when something didn't quite sit right, it fed this thirst for knowledge that I had then, and I still have now. And I came across this phrase in the Bible. I said, oh, and it says, you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. And I read it somewhere else, and it said, the truth will set you free. And those two words, although they appear to be the same, they're not the same. To set free and make free are not the same. The connotation is not the same. I am made free because of knowledge that I have, that I've gained through experience and yes, through reading. I am made free. Some things that would probably upset someone or instill fear in you, knowing the fullness of it or knowing another side of it takes that fear away. I'm not afraid. I am set free. I am emancipated, even though I'm sitting right here. I am free. Those words. Anxiety. A lot of people suffer from anxiety. Some people have anxiety and don't even know why. Don't know what they're afraid of. They're just afraid. They just feel afraid, but they don't know why they're afraid. But if something comes along and enlightens them and gives them that moment of, take that anxiety away. That can come about by reading. When I was younger, I was on the phone with a friend of mine. I was in my teen years, maybe 14. And I was on the phone with a friend of mine, and I spelled something. Actually, what happened was she was doing homework, and she asked me how to spell something, and I spelled it out for her. Well, my younger brother was sitting there, and he had not yet learned to read, fluently to read. And so he went running to the bedroom to tell my mother that I was spelling stuff. I was saying stuff that I didn't want him to know what I was saying, so I was spelling it. And he said, it's just like when the mailman didn't want me to know what he was saying to you, when he told me to come tell you something. And my mother said, what are you talking about? When did the mailman not want you to know what he was saying? And he says, well, the other day when he told me to tell you COD, and he didn't want me to know what he was telling you. And that bothered him. He wanted to know what it was, but because he didn't know what COD meant, he thought there was some larger secret that someone was keeping from him, and it bothered him. It bothered him enough that he didn't say anything right then, but it came to his mind again, hearing me spell something that he didn't know what it was, and he felt he was left out of something because he did not know what the spelling meant. And that concerned him. And you know what? It should have, and it should concern each and every one of us today, when our children can go to school 13 years, at least 13, because they're beginning with preschool now, at least 13 years, and come out and still can't tell you, still can't read. And therefore, there's this whole area of humanity that they are locked out of because they could not understand. Now, my mother did tell my brother what COD was. Cash on delivery. Back then, she would always order stuff, and it was cash on delivery. So then, that took away that anguish that he was carrying around for a week or so, simply because he did not understand. He didn't know what was being said. And that really is what's happening with so many people. Now, it's not just black people, but for a large number, it is true. You're being kept out because you don't understand. And you don't understand because you don't have the ability to read. You don't have the advantage of what reading can do and how it can help you think critically again, how it can help you understand when people are playing you. When people are saying one thing, they're saying something to you, but they're meaning something totally different. And therefore, you're kept in the dark. And if you are kept in the dark, there's always something that you are not able to completely be a part of. If you would keep a people enslaved, refuse to teach them to read. And that's what's happening within our classrooms now. Our children are not being taught, and they are put in situations to where they are put in alternative situations. Some of them are even sent to juvenile detention. Some of them end up in the prison to the school to prison pipeline, simply because by design they are not being taught. They are not being taught. And we, given our trust over and our responsibility to teach our children over to someone else, we're making it, we're helping, we're aiding and abetting in the destruction of our children when it comes to not being educated. I found several studies, and we are the most studied of people, trust me. If you would really look at some of the studies, some of the things that people are using us as guinea pigs for, you would be amazed and if not outraged. But I looked at some of the studies, some of the recent studies that have been conducted having to do with black students. And I came across this one that was talking about how black students are shut out of colleges because of their activism. Students that are interested in racial justice are less likely to gain entrance into some of the private, especially liberal art colleges, because of this activism. They can have the grades and be at the top of their class, but if they have shown any interest in racial justice, we're not going to teach you. The study is entitled, "We Want Black Students, Just Not You." How white admission counselors screen black prospective students. We want black students. We just don't want you. How white admission counselors screen black prospective students. And that's by Ted Thornhill. I'll put this at the end of the video broadcast. The second one I found, it was a parent who found her child in the situation of not learning once he got to public school. And it is entitled, Why I Chose to Unschool My Son, by Nikki. It says, when my son was in grade 5, I noticed he didn't understand basic math concepts. I reached out to the teacher, who told me she hadn't noticed. My son entered 6th grade, and more problems regarding school began to arise. Again, I will put that title at the end of the video broadcast. The ACLU report, and I think I mentioned this the last time, showing that the federal data shows that nationwide, public schools are a hotbed of racial injustice. It examines the data from all 63,000 public schools in this country. And an interesting find, or one interesting find, because it had several, but one interesting find was that there were 11 million days lost of instruction due to suspension in 1 year. And I believe that year was 2015, 2016. In 1 year, there were 11 million days of lost instruction due to students being suspended. And black students accounted for 45% of those days lost due to suspension. That's like almost 5 million days of education lost to black students. The result of this discipline gap, and the study goes into that, how that is. The result of this discipline gaps contributes to the achievement gap. Black students are only 15% of the student population nationally. 15% of the student population, accounting for 45% of lost days of instruction. Nearly 5 million lost days of instruction. How are they to learn? How are they to learn? And once you look into the report, you look at the discipline gap and how black children are treated differently for the same infraction, you will see it's by design. Black children are not intended to be taught by the public education system as it is now. There are examples, however, of schools that have been started that are addressing this problem. It's just that there are not enough of them. But one such school you can find at northstarboys.org, and it's a school that was established after the founders did research, and the research was done nationally, and they observed both private and parochial schools and public schools also. They interviewed African American students and Latino students. and found that these young men wanted to learn. They wanted to be held to a high expectation. They wanted their success viewed through an expansive lens, as they say. Now, this school at NorthstarBoys.com is a single gender middle school, beginning at fourth grade, through 8th grade. And it's in Washington, D.C. Again, I'll put that information at the end of the video broadcast. But expectations. For children, expectation is important. They thrive on expectation. If the parents expect a certain level or quality of educations, the children will strive to rise to that. If the teachers show that they are expecting a certain level of achievement, the students will strive to reach that. And this is especially true of young black students. They want to please. It is in their nature. They want to give you what you expect. So if you expect and let them know that you expect them to be high achievers, to learn, they'll give that to you. If you want to keep people enslaved, refuse to teach them to read. The fear? Reading and writing could become a means of communication that would make it easier to plan and free themselves. Reading gives us somewhere to go when we have to stay where we are. This last phrase was in a window display of a local thrift store trying to sell books. This is Evelyn Bowden. Join me next time and share the video.